Hello,
Hello.
Michael. How are you doing?
Oh, not too bad. How about you?
Good. Can you hear me and see me? Okay.
I can, yeah. Yeah.
Perfect. That's great. Michael, look, I really appreciate you taking the time. Sorry about yesterday. There must have been a mix-up with time zones and schedules and all
Yeah.
the rest. But I appreciate you taking the time out today to sit down and have a chat with me.
Yeah, no problem. Not a problem.
Michael, I know you. So, what part of the world are you in? Talking about time zones.
I'm in Canada, in the Pacific Northwest of Canada.
Oh, Canada. Oh, very good. And what's happening in Canada at the moment? Anything exciting?
Oh, nothing too exciting now. Kind of same old, same things everyone else is going through.
Yeah, it's a bit of a political turmoil up there, isn't it? And like that, Ireland's no better, I don't think.
Yeah, we've definitely got our issues with our government and stuff like that, but I think we have an election coming up in this year or next year, so hopefully we can
Yeah,
do something about it.
yeah. Please God, says you. Yeah. Look, Michael, I tell you how I stumbled across your page. Really was from Instagram, and I'd seen this no grid survival projects pop up a lot. And
Yeah.
props to your PR guy because I seen it a good bit and I seen it gain so much traction and it's very interesting. And I thought it was very it's interesting time for something like that to launch. And I think a lot of people jumped onto it because of the recent few years we've been having. Um, but first, I'd like to hear a bit about your own background, kind of your upbringing, if you're always Canadian, and what brought you down eventually to this path.
Well, I was always like I've grown up in British Columbia, Canada, born and raised, and I was always like a self-reliant person. Like as a kid, there was like a green space in a creek by my house. I spent most of my time in there building shelters, making fires, just practicing primitive survival skills, stuff like that, going fishing and things like that. When I got old enough, I joined the military and then I deployed overseas as a NATO peacekeeper to the former Yugoslavia. And when I came back, I kind of saw what was like what the result of like a regional conflict would be like, and how like you could basically get knocked down to the Stone Age pretty quickly. So at that like at that time, I kind of decided that yeah, I need to be like even more self-reliant, have more skills. So I became a welder fabricator, got a lot of hands-on building fabrication skills from that. And I always had a passion for writing, so I started writing as well. And that's how the people who I wrote this book for found me, was I was writing DIY articles about self-reliance stuff for them. And they asked if I wanted to do a book with them, and I said, yeah, sure, absolutely. And then No Grid Survival Project was born.
When did you write that book?
Oh, it's a couple of years ago now. I believe it was, oh, I want to say 2021. I think we started writing. It took a year to write, getting all the projects together, and there's a few other authors as well on the book. So getting everything together took quite a while. I feel like it was a solid year before it actually got published, but it's been out for a few years now.
Yeah, because I noticed your Facebook page is only, I think, January 22,
Yeah,
and yet it has such a following to it. It's amazing how quick it picked up on, you know.
yeah.
Again, maybe the sign of the times. Why do you think your ancestry, your family, your father, your grandfather, were they all army veterans as well? Like, where does the self-reliance come at such a young age?
I'm not sure where it comes from a young age. Both my grandfathers were in the military. My dad was a tradesperson as well. I know I just always kind of wanted to do things myself. I'm a independent person. I don't really like asking for help and stuff. And I also am pretty cheap, so I don't like spending a lot of money and stuff. I like to do as much as I can by myself. Like if I can build it, I will, type thing. So I've always had that mindset and that attitude. So it just was a natural thing that kind of developed with me. But like the state of the world definitely guides me more towards a self-reliance aspect.
Yeah, I'd say, um, you know what I feel probably makes your website and your book so popular now is, um, I'm sure, look, you had all these tools, and the fact that your father being a tradesman and your grandfather and great grandfather being in the military all obviously bled into you. You obviously had these projects, had knowledge of these projects, and were able to do these projects before 2021. But did you see the dangers of the last few years? Let's say, well, we're talking 2021, so COVID would have been the main thing that was all over the news and the kind of fear
Yeah.
mongering of it and all that, and people were worried. I know, um, and to be honest, I think as well there was this worry among people that um, are some of society going to be pushed out a bit to the Netherlands where when these passports started coming into play, and some people said, "Yeah, I'm all for it," and some people said, "Oh, hold on a second, I'm not too sure. Is this taking away a bit of my freedom? I'd rather become a bit more self-sufficient." I know that conversation has happened among my friends and my peers in the last couple of years about getting your own herbs in and digging your own drill. Um, but I guess like you obviously saw an opportunity where this could help a lot of people out in 2021 and said, have you heard many people come back to you with feedback that, this is great, it's working well? Any stories like that from after releasing the book?
Nothing, no big stories. I have had a few emails from people asking follow-up questions, and then they're looking to build like the solar power system and stuff like that. I think someone emailed me about putting together a rainwater harvesting system, and just asked a few follow-up questions about that and stuff. That everyone I've talked to about the book has been pretty positive, and I have had a few comments where people said it is like even for someone with no skills, it's easy to like everything's broken down to a level that you can figure it out, and it doesn't take a lot of like hands-on. Like you don't need to have like a trade to build any of this stuff. It's we've laid it out easy enough that and most people can pick up the book, go to Home Depot, buy the stuff, and put it together with very little effort, very little fuss.
Yeah, and can you give us some of the examples of what's in the book? And so you mentioned there your rainwater treatment system.
Yeah, we cover so much. There's like 70 projects in the book. Cover so much stuff in it. The main ones are the water. We cover how to make water, like how to get store your water properly, how to use like 55-gallon drums to store your water, how to use smaller containers, like tips and that. We have the rainwater harvesting system, which is like three 55-gallon drums stacked on top of each other, which provides also pressure with the gravity's pulling down. It actually provides a bit of water pressure with that. Um, we have some filtering methods in there. We have a hot water heater that you can attach to a wood stove. We have ways to reclaim water. We have like a toilet top tank, like a hand washing station that we describe in the book. And the big project in the book, which was a big source for us, was the solar power system. How to get the solar panels, the batteries, how to hook it all up, how to basically install it in such a way that you can power a fridge and a laptop and charge your devices. And if you, as long as you have sunlight, you can do it pretty much indefinitely. So it gives you a lot of power, self-reliance. And that was a big project in the book. That took a long time to do. But aside from that, we have like how to grow your own food, how to secure your property with traps and stuff. We
Mm.
have like we talked about how to make gardens and what kind of things you should be putting in those gardens. There's a few recipes there for like survival foods. Um, but most of it is geared towards like how do you grow your own food, like the real self-reliant stuff. But yeah, we cover how to make a greenhouse. And there's how to do indoor greenhouse, outdoor greenhouse. Like our goal was to have as many projects as possible that you could take the book and you could almost 100% make yourself self-reliant. And if you follow all the projects in the book, you can pretty much get there. I mean, obviously, it's hard to be 100% self-reliant, but with the book, you'd be really, really close to getting it.
Yeah, I heard a statistic last year that if the power went in America, it was something like 60% of people would be gone within the first few months or something, that they just wouldn't have a clue. It's a little bit sad, I suppose, because that's definitely a sign of the times as well. And it's not when I say that, everyone says that as if it's a bad reflection on the current generation, but the current generation is only living in the world that their technology has progressed to. Like it's if people are driving the car, they're not going to go out running to work, when shoes aren't, like they're not going to be out pumping water if the taps are flowing with the, hot water pumps. Y- But it has made us vulnerable to any disasters that might come our way. Because I think even we're only talking about a couple of decades since people will have much better chance of survival. As the years go on, we get less and less self-sufficient, and food is in abundance, and rubbish food is in abundance, obviously, as well. But yeah, like I've seen a lot of your videos, and the risks of, well, we have a lot of catastrophes with the weather lately, and we have the pandemics, and we have a lot of extreme things happen where the news isn't shocking people anymore. Um, like how likely do you see? Obviously, you released this book in 2021, recently enough. How likely do you think it is that some unforeseen event might push us to where we might have to go off grid, even if it's for a short period of time? Solar flares or even EMP strike.
Well, I think unfortunately the actual possibility of grid down scenarios is like highly probable. Uh, the the chance of a coronal mass ejection is, if you expand the timeline long enough, is 100%. We've been hit before. We were hit in 1859 with the Carrington event, and that at that time we had very minimal electricity. So it was the only reason we really know it happened was the telegraph system. A lot of the the telegraph system acted like an antenna, which is what our power grid would act like. So when the coronal mass ejection hit the Earth, it energized telegraph system, and people were able to like send telegraphs without any actual power because it was self-powering. Several telegraph stations caught fire. Lots of people were hurt, but because we had no widespread power grid for the average person, there was no, there was really no evidence that anything had actually happened. And if that were to happen today, it would just wipe out our power grid. Power grid would be gone. And that is a something that will eventually happen. Coronal mass ejections are regular occurrences. They get shot out from the sun on a very regular basis. It's just it's basically like a game of Russian roulette. Eventually, one of them is going to hit us. Like the sun's going to send one out in a direction, and it's going to interact with us, and it's just a matter of time. But it could happen 100 years from now. It could happen 1,000 years from now. It could happen next year. It could happen in the next 5 minutes. We can't predict it. We don't know. We could get a little bit of forewarning, but we can't really predict when and where these things are going to happen. For an EMP strike, I see that as being a less of a possibility, only because uh, EMPs are limited to countries that have them. So you have to have a nuclear capability in order to launch an EMP strike. I could see something like that happening if, say, for example, China wanted to invade Taiwan and they wanted to take the United States out of the picture for a little while. I could see them using, say, North Korea to launch an EMP attack as like a proxy, knowing that the retaliation would be on North Korea. I could see that happening, but like for a superpower to just launch a EMP strike, I don't see that as being likely. And for terrorists to get a hold of one, it's not impossible, but it's also unlikely as well. The big risk I see if the power grid is twofold. One is cyber terrorism. It's a massive risk of the power grid. A lot of these systems are not exactly the most advanced. They're Some of them are easily hackable, and then even not even with cyber terrorism, with just regular terrorism, if you shoot transformers in the right way with just a small caliber rifle, and you hit the right transformer in the right spot in the grid, if you have that kind of knowledge, you can wipe out power to large areas. And it's all it takes is the knowledge of when and where to hit and how to hit it. If you shoot a transformer and you drain all the coolant out of it, the thing just melts down. It's a very, very simple thing to do. There have been many cases in the States where that has happened, where people have started taking shots at transformers, and it's not really very well publicized or talked about, which I think is probably for a good reason to not give anyone any ideas. But another thing that could happen to the power grid beyond that is just it's just taxed. It's old. It's There's too much. Everyone's getting an electric car now. All that power is going to come from somewhere. It's very expensive to upkeep. No one wants nuclear power plants. Like it's hard to maintain, and overloading the power grid, like we saw that in Texas. just the ice took out the power grid. Like it so easily happened, and I think it's going to happen so much more in the near future because it's just taking us so long to get ahead of the curve on that.
Yeah, here in Ireland, and it's probably worldwide because a lot of these things, these policies seem to be rolling out worldwide at the same time. But there's incentives for buying electric cars and getting diesel and petrol cars off the road by 2030, which isn't that far away. And I see a lot of people stand up and saying, hold on a second, our power grid can't support everybody switching over to electric vehicles. And I only seen this week actually that electric vehicles can be more harmful for the environment, even, even from the production standpoint. Um, there seems to be, without getting too down and dirty straight away, um, there's a worry that our reliance will all go on everything electric. And like I have a stove sitting beside the laptop now, and I know, and even they're targeting the stoves in the regular person's house now as well. They want everything air to water. They want everyone electric cars. Um, and it's leading into the whole digital currency and everything being online. And there's a lot of people, even in my peer group who are kind of saying, well, hold on a second. It's not that we're old fashioned, but we're just seeing a few red flags here. And I think that's the type of people who might actually be I'm only guessing, but the people who are tuning into your projects that are kind of saying, well, I don't want an air to water house and I want to keep my stove and I want to be self-sufficient and I want to have my chickens and grow my farm, my herbs and my vegetables. But do you see an agenda against that yourself politically?
Well, there's definitely an agenda to get rid of fossil fuels, and the push to the electric cars is happening here in Canada as well. I think they've said 2035 they don't want to have any more gas cars sold in Canada. And I believe in some places in the States too. I think California is one of them. It has a similar push to that. And we've had the same things where they want to try to break reliance on like natural gas. Like I have a natural gas stove in our house, which I love. It's just the best for cooking. But the in the name of climate change, they're trying to push for it all to go electric. And I don't know if it's just a political move to just try to look like you're more they're uh, trying to be like pro climate, or if it's an actual push to get everything on one grid so that it can be taken away at any time. I'm not sure what that would be. Like I can't really comment on the motivations, but I do see it happening all over the place, and there is definitely a move to get us more dependent on the electrical grid and try to get everything on there, and then even like communications grids and stuff like that as well. Like there's a definite push to keep us as dependent on a few different basic grids that so that we can't go outside of them.
Yeah, and I think you can see this in now look, stop me if you don't want to go down certain routes of conversation, but you can see in the likes of China where if you if you step outside what their barriers are, their let's say, whatever they have in place, they have the 15-minute cities over there and they have the social credit system and they have all these type of things. And I know Ireland, we have our prime minister who sits with the WEF in Davos every year, and it seems like Dublin now is the capital of Ireland. That's becoming a 15-minute city, and they sell it as though there's more green areas and transport will be better, but really it seems like it's just of taking the control of everyone's move, of their private usage and everything, and for them to have, and for us to have to comply with whatever mandates are put in place. And there's a lot of bills coming being pushed through Ireland at the moment, and hate speech bills that got, I think, a lot of worldwide coverage on the news. Obviously the electric car thing, the 15-minute cities, the it seems a lot. Even taking private property rights, and I think this is why the only reason I'm bringing this up as well is because this is why I think this is what brought me to want to talk to you. This is what caught my eye with the self-sufficiency thing. I think if people had a business where they went around to people's gardens and said, you know, I can do these projects that say you've laid out in the book and I can dig your drills for you and all you have to do is maintain it. I think they'd make massive money now because I think there's so many people who are looking for that at the moment, who don't know where to start and they're confused about it. Obviously to someone like yourself that's trying to be self-sufficient as a kid all the way growing up, it's probably coming a bit more natural to you that when you see pandemics or crises, you can say, well, look, here's a book for those who want it. And if we're going electric and we're so reliant on electric in modern times, if things go down, it's there. It's a handbook. Um, I guess I, I guess I lost my question in that, but what do you think of what I've said there as a Eastern policy push to the West? Um, and I suppose where your book can come in as a good utility there.
Well, I definitely see it as like even amongst people I talk to, as there's like this kind of silent rebellion against some of the stuff you're talking about, like the 15-minute cities, the electric cars, and I think people do see like a book like No Great Survival Projects and like getting your own chickens or getting a a garden in your backyard or even on like the patio of your apartment building, right? And doing stuff like that, they see that as a sign of almost rebellion against the people who want to kind of control them. And then even just having simple things like getting a little solar power system so that when the grid does go down, like you can keep your fridge going and you can charge your phones and stuff like that. Like it's those things I do see people as like I say, as a silent little bit of rebellion against the system because we all kind of feel it where whether it's planned or not, we're becoming, and you said it before, we're becoming more and more dependent every generation. It's like you can see it. Like I grew up in the '80s. Like the life back then was so much different than it is now. And I can't like I look at my kids and how they're growing up, and it's like the world is so different. And but it's also like it's like with all of this, our self-reliance going down and our reliance on technology kind of going up. That technology does bring a lot of good stuff with it. Like it, I mean, we can we can say like the internet and social media and all that is bad, but it's also promoting no grid survival projects and it's showing people that they can actually do these things and build these projects and they can do it themselves, which is why we have the physical book too, because it's all well and good to for me to make a bunch of videos and put them out there, but when the grid goes down, you have no access to the internet anymore. So now, if you have the book, you can open it up, and everything's so simple. You could actually most of those projects, if the grid was down for a significant time, you could probably pick up the book and scavenge most of what you need. Like I'm pretty confident that in a grid down scenario, you could acquire almost everything you need from that book just by scavenging. Like you could find it around your within like I don't know, say 10, 20 mile radius of wherever you're living. You could probably get everything you needed. Wheel it, deal it, or just outright steal it. Like you could find all the stuff. So that's where the book is. That's why we're insistent on having a hard copy of the book that you can put on your bookshelf. And even if you don't make the projects now and you wait and the grid goes down, you can still pull that book out, start rifling through it, and you could probably make a lot of stuff work.
I mean, dig into your brain a little bit on, I think it'd be interesting, kind of the first steps how you would react if something like that was to happen tomorrow morning. Where would you go? I know a lot of people will go, we have a tendency for fight and flight and panic would set in. But, if there's 5 or 6 steps you could remember, what would you think would come to mind first?
Well, if we're talking about the grid going down, um, the problem with like the grid going down is it kind of depends on the scenario, right? So let's just say it was a wide scale like coronal mass ejection for worst case scenario, right? Where there's coronal mass ejection, the grid goes down. Uh, None of us are going to know. what the extent of the disaster is right away. It's like all we're going to know on something like that, because the coronal mass ejection is not going to affect your cell phone. It'll affect power grids basically only. Like your complex electronics should be fine in a coronal mass ejection. So as far as anyone's going to be concerned, the power's gone. Power just went out, and power goes out all the time. It just happens. So there's not going to be a lot of panic right away, and that is where your survival mindset has to be like cut out. Like whenever the power goes out, the first thing I think is, ooh, is this widespread or is this local? And I check. If I can check, if I can go on the internet from my cell phone, I know automatically right there, okay, this is a local event. This is not a coronal mass ejection. The internet's fine. And then I can breathe a sigh of relief. If that didn't work, if I went on my phone and I couldn't access the internet, I'd be like, okay, now I need to find out, number one, how widespread is this thing? And that's where amateur radio comes into play. I've got like amateur radios set aside, and they're in Faraday cages. I can pull them out. I can run an antenna up a tree, and I can start scanning through the shortwave frequencies, and I should be able to find out very quickly, either by the total lack of traffic and the total lack of communications going out, or by people talking about what's happening in their areas, how widespread this disaster is. And if it's like a nationwide or planet-wide event, my immediate uh, my immediate thought is going to be hunker down. I have a it's a what do they call it? I can't remember what they call it. It's a water bladder that goes in your bathtub, and you hook it up to your water spout. First thing I would do, turn that thing on, fill that thing up. It's about, I think, 100 gallons worth of water, because that now increases my water stockpile, because water is going to be huge after a grid down event like that, because now all the water pumps aren't working. While that's filling up, I'm securing my house, making sure that everything's like all my door or all my security measures are in place, everything's good, that my house is secure, even though I know that there's going to be a very long lag between when people realize the power's out to the point where they realize it's a real emergency. There's going to be a long time where people are just kind of wandering around. Oh, it's a regular power outage. And that's the period of time where I'm acting. So once I've secured everything, I've got as much water out of the tap as I possibly can. I'm going out. I'm going shopping. I've got cash. I've got it's not much. I got a couple $100 in cash just for emergencies like this. I'm going shopping. I'm getting staples, flour, rice. Uh, don't usually need toilet paper. My wife keeps us really stocked up on that. But any staple items we need, non-perishables, I'm buying as much as I physically can, and using as much cash as I can. I'm buying all that. I'm bringing it home, and I'm not running away, because it's unless you have somewhere to go, bugging out, it's just not. It's there's no point. You're just going to be now surviving on the road with limited resources, where you should be staying home where all your resources is. And you should also be, as soon as people realize what's going on, you should be liaising with your neighbors, getting together, trying to like form a bit of a group in the community, saying, "Hey, this is we're going to be in this for a while. This is the information I have." Uh, I've got this book, No Grid Survival Projects. I've built a few things here and there, but and just basically try to get them all on board, and because you're not gonna be able to do it by yourself, you have to have people around you, and especially for security, because after a day, 2 days, then people are going to start getting desperate. And once they realize how widespread the disaster is, and once that word starts getting out, then you're going to start seeing people looking to loot and to steal from other people. The criminal element will come up. Police, or hospitals, EMS, fire departments, they're all going to collapse, because as soon as their paychecks are guaranteed to not come, they're just not going to go to work. They have families to worry about. So all of that's going to collapse. The local governments will collapse, and by extension, the fed or the like state, provincial, federal governments are going to collapse, because without the power they had over us before, there's no enforcement of everything, and it's all going to come down to making sure you got enough water, making sure that your neighbors are on board, that you've kind of formed a bit of a group around you, and to make sure that you're taking care of people around you and they're taking care of you without disclosing too much about what you have. Like, you don't, if you have a year's worth of water stored away. You don't want to tell people that. Do you have a lot of food stored away? You don't want to tell people that. You want to kind of keep a lot of stuff close to your chest, but make sure that you're letting people know that you can be someone that you can, help them out and help out people get together, because at the end of the day, it's going to have to be small communities of people that are going to have the band together. You're going to have to start like thinking about growing food. Like all this stuff's going to have to happen right away. Like you have to start thinking about how you're going to gather meat. You're going to have to think about what you're going to plant, who's got a garden, how many people know about gardening. Start getting that going, because at a coronal mass ejection, it could be like years before you ever see power come back on again. So it's all going to be come down to uh, forming a survival community around you.
And tell me, does optimal self-sufficiency include the ability to hunt, even the ability to acquire some self-defense skills in the event of that? Would you include them in being prepared? I know you're going through the doomsday scenario, which is
Yeah.
unlikely to be that catastrophic. But say there's solar flares and you're down for a month, maybe that's long enough that people will come, that break-ins will go up straight away, shortly afterwards. Um, like I know the utility of hunting is dying out massively. Would you consider
Yeah.
that a good utility to keep?
I would say hunting is, if you can do it, I think it's great. I think hunting and fishing are two things that you should, like. If you can't hunt, like some people just can't hunt. Some people are just not, they're not hunters, right? But you should probably know how to fish. And then with that, you need to know how to properly clean and cook a fish, right? I'm a hunter. I'm a very bad hunter. I have yet to actually harvest a deer, but my boys and I go out hunting, and we've harvested a bunch of grouse and stuff. And until you actually like take the animal and like break it apart and cook it, you don't really know how to do that. And even if even if you're someone who doesn't ever really want to hunt, if you know someone who does hunt, it's always a good idea to just go with them. Say, hey, can I come with you? 99% of hunters are going to be like, yeah, absolutely. They'd love to get someone into the sport. And it's an important thing to kind of understand how, like, if you ever had to gather your own food, you're like, the odds of ever being in an extended grid down scenario and then going out and harvesting a deer and using that is almost you might as well not even think about it as a strategy. But like around my neighborhood here, there are bunnies everywhere. Like there's little cottontails. They're an invasive species that everywhere. I could probably walk out any morning. I could walk out and grab five of them. Like they're everywhere. But if you don't know how to properly clean and cook it, or to trap it, which we actually have some instructions in the book about how to trap small animals. Like you should know how to do that. And then with fishing too, know how to fish, um, and then actually go out fish, catch a fish, bring it home, clean it, cook it, and just kind of get a feel for how that process works. And once you do it once, you're good. Like you clean one fish, you can clean like a million fish. Like you just have to do it once. There's a little, it's a bit of a process. You got to get over that kind of like ick factor of putting your hands in the guts and ripping it out. But once you do it once, I mean, my kids have done it once, I think, each, and they're fine. Like they're like, oh yeah, I can clean that, right? First time they did it, they're like, oh yeah, this is no problem. I know how to do this now. But when it comes to self defense, that's a tricky one, because a lot of countries, I don't know what it's like in Ireland, but in Canada, our self defense laws are they're really not very good. You can't use firearms for self defense in almost any scenario. Um, Even buying firearms is like, it's very difficult, and you can't use defense as a reason to buy firearms. You have to either be a target shooter or hunting. And but if you say you have a firearm for defense, unless you are trained and know how to use it, you're actually doing more harm than good. Your odds of having that go badly are far greater than if you had no firearm at all. And because people don't people think that they can practice a little bit, buy a handgun or a rifle or whatever, and they'll be fine in a grid down scenario. Oh, I can defend my family. It's like, no, you can't. You really can't defend your family because you've now, the second you have a firearm that now you don't know how to use, you've now escalated the situation to where now whoever's breaking into your house is now almost being forced to meet your level of of defense. Now it's now lethal, and lethal, and if they're even slightly better than you, it's a no-brainer. I do think for everybody, some basic martial arts skills are very important for not only your fitness and health and stuff like that, but just for uh, your confidence in the event of you have to interact with people in a post grid down world. Like I'm a blue belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and a high green belt in kickboxing. And before I did martial arts, like I always knew that if I ever encounter someone that if there was a fight, I maybe could handle myself, but maybe not. Now I know that, okay, if someone's going to try to attack me, I have a whole whack of tools and I can defend myself. And that alone makes me more calm. And so in a grid down scenario, if I'm interacting with someone, I'm going to have a lot more of a calm demeanor. And I'm not going to be as aggressive. I'm not going to be nervous. I'm not going to be like, scared that everyone's going to attack me because I know, okay, well, if something happens, like I have all these tools to avoid being taken or being attacked. I could avoid a fight very easily. So for someone who's not trained, for someone who has no martial arts skills, has no training at all, they're always going to be their cortisol levels going to be high. They're going to be nervous. They're going to be like always thinking, "Oh, someone's going to attack me," and that alone is going to escalate the possibility of violent interaction. So, like, if it comes to self-defense, just having some martial arts training is going to make you so much more calm, and it's going to avoid so many problems, not only in your daily life, but in a post-grid down scenario as well.
Yeah, and I think, we were talking about in grid down scenarios. The longer it goes on, the more primitive stage we go back to, and I think it's nearly, you feel as though it's your duty to be looking after your family or to have it's a responsibility to maybe even have an essential kit, whether it be the skill set that you've acquired by martial arts, let's say, or self-defense, or whether it be the actual physical kit, like a fishing rod, or like you said, something about amateur radio and your water device. Like, do you go through a list of essential survival kit that in the event, here's where your radio should be, and here's where your water gallons should be, or what you should maybe have in stock in that event?
Well, I think number one is always going to be water. Water
Mm.
is huge because you can only last about 3 days without water. And having so your rule of thumb is going to be a gallon of water per person per day, and then that includes your pets. So I got a chocolate lab, so that means 5 gallons of water per day is my what I'm allotting. Now that also uh, covers cooking, cleaning, brushing teeth, stuff like that as well. So it's not like the gallon of water is a good rule of thumb to have, but it's not. You're not necessarily going to use a whole gallon of water every day per person. But that's basically your rule of thumb for planning. So I have like a 55-gallon drum turned on its side in my garage where it's filled most of the way up with water. So I think that's about probably 45-ish gallons worth of water there. I have this in different areas around the house. I have other jerry cans of water, and I split them up and put them around the house because I live in an earthquake zone. So if there's an earthquake and there's a partial collapse of the house, which is unlikely because with wood frame construction, but if it were to happen, I don't want all my water to be in one spot where it gets destroyed. And then I also have the water bladder that I can put into my bathtub. But with the water, uh, with wherever your water is, having a water filter in those locations as well, again, having multiples is also essential because if you have to gather water from anywhere else, you have to be able to filter it. And boiling it is probably okay enough, but you have to think about in an urban environment chemicals. And other things there'll be sediments, chemicals, things like that you don't want to be drinking. So you want to have a filter that's going to filter as much out as possible. There's tons of filters on the market. Describe a primitive filter you can build in the book, but water with filters is essential. Number one, absolutely must have. Second, I would actually put amateur radio because if you want to really be prepared, you really want to be self-sufficient, you have to get off the communications grid. And every country's got a different way of becoming an amateur radio operator. In Canada, it's a 100-question test to get a basic license. And even if you just get the most basic amateur radio license and you get just a little handy talkie radio, you can communicate with repeater networks in your area. And all those repeaters that are around your area are all off grid because ham radio operators were off grid right away. Like we're always thinking battery backups, so all the repeaters are going to be off grid anyways. So when the grid goes down, those will still be up, and you can still communicate. And as long as you are a licensed amateur radio operator, you get on these nets, you start talking. You can get a lot more information. You can find out what's going on. You can start hearing how governments are coordinating, and you can also help out a little bit as well. So the amount of information it's going to get you and the amount of help it's going to get you as well is well worth whatever the cost of the test is. And it's basically almost your number two priority if you want to be really self-sufficient. And then beyond that, just like try to have like I don't think like for most people having like a year's worth of food on hand is super practical. It's a lot of space, but you should have at least several weeks of food. And it's not that difficult. I do it at home by just always having a bunch of food and rotating it out. Just the stuff you eat on a daily basis, just having enough food in your house to last a couple of weeks and then just making sure you're eating the old stuff first. And it's pretty easy to do, like keeping extra bags of rice, extra flour, things like that. It's very easy to do. And then like beyond that, having basic camping gear is going to be it's going to be good enough for if you had to leave, then you could at least if you have camping gear, you can at least set up a camp somewhere. And if you can go to a campsite and camp, you can bug out with that same gear. It's just going to be not like a true bug out bag.
Yeah. And it's interesting you're talking about water filters. There's probably a great utility for water filters these days, even I'd imagine, like regardless of the scenarios, the doomsday scenarios, and I think Ireland is being brought up in European courts for its water quality issues at the moment. We're lucky enough here we have a well, but on top of that we have a UV treated and we have the reverse osmosis system put in, and it's not that we're over paranoid or anything like that, but there's a well there that need to be cleaned. So, but I used to do a bit of personal training with people, and one of the people worked for Waterways Ireland, so Irish Water, and she told me I'd never drink what comes out of the tap in Ireland. And I think America is supposed to be worse than that. I don't know what Canada's like, but and there's nearly utility and everyone having water filters at the moment, even as it is.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. Being able to filter your water is pretty essential. Um, in Canada, water around here is pretty good. Other provinces are not as good, but in the States, I've drank some water at the taps in different areas of the United States, and yeah, the taste alone tells you that something's up with it.
Yeah, and you mentioned there as well about the kids going to school in a different, world as the 80s when you yourself grow up. Um, Sometimes it often I would have, I suppose your background dictates kind of what you think would be essential for kids to learn these days, rather than the different things that are coming into the curriculums. But the likes of your book, even, you can imagine how much utility that would have for kids in a secondary school environment if they had, like I always thought, the physical education classes here in Ireland are once or maybe twice a week, and it's just go and hit a shuttlecock over the thing or play dodgeball. There's nothing about there's no nutritional, there's no stretching, there's no anatomy, there's no heart
Yeah,
rate stuff, and there's nothing that's actually essential to being healthy and what food does to your body. There's no theory in it at all. And it's a shame because it seems it's such an essential thing to keep yourself fit and well. And obviously, obesity's going through the roof. And I'm not saying just lack of exercise, but it's also our food chain. But knowing them, like even we're talking about going out hunting for meat, I can see the utility in that these days, just for the pure natural aspect of the meat you're getting, knowing where it comes from and that it's grazing on grass and it's not being pumped with anything. The same with chickens. So I go to a friend of mine up the Wicklow Mountains, and he has chickens there, and when I get an egg there, it's nothing like even the most organic free range things I can pick up in the shop. It's completely better. The shells are
You know.
tougher, the egg is yellower, you can see the difference. Um, but do you think like you could ever see a scenario where you could bring that book into even local schools to get a push on that? I think there's a massive, even if you got a local politician running it, I think there'd be a massive utility in that.
Well, there definitely would be. It's a tough place to get into. This, I know our education here is provincially mandated, and but I think from the parents' perspective, from people I've talked to, like we're always, at the school pickup, we're always complaining about what the kids are learning is like, oh, why don't they learn how to do their own taxes, right? Why are they learning how to do some abstract math problem when they could be learning something practical? Why are they being forced to do music when they could be like out, building something? Or like there's so many things that, yeah, like a book like No Grid Survival Projects would, it would be definitely a big help. But I think at the end of the day, it's also like the parents are the ones who do a lot of the education of that kind of stuff, whereas we just outsource the reading, writing, and arithmetic, whatever else, to the teachers.
Yeah, and there seems to be in the school a push towards the humanities and the college degree where trades are falling off, and there's massive supply. There's a massive demand for tradesmen here in Ireland, and you're waiting months before someone come out and do a simple plumber job in your house.
Yep.
I have a friend who you said you're a metal fabricator, welder fabricator. A friend who is a metal fabricator, and his phone is forever hopping. He could do
Yep.
his full week's work, and he'd never come home on a Saturday or Sunday because people are just looking for him. Truck trailers need to be fixed, like, and there's
Yep.
people gates need to be put up, sheds for farmers, like everything is going. And it's a bit of a shame that we've gone that way because yeah, like even for the job pool scenario, everyone's looking at your experience in college rather than your experience in real life, or how practical you could be thinking outside the box, or it's all just academic. They don't want to see you or hear from you. They want to just see what's on the paper, what you
Yep.
are in terms of what number you've achieved. It's an awful shame. It's definitely a different world than what we grew up in, I think. I was always going that way, but it's the lack of obvious focus on trade and pushing people towards that is baffling, and maybe it is the agenda of not letting people be too self-sufficient again. Um, I don't know. I seen you had a yeah, you had a post up on, about bunkers, let's say, the Zuckerbergs and the Gates of the world who
Mm.
definitely have questionable motivations, I would say, in most of their recent things. But you know, in terms of a bunker, are how essential is something like that? When you see, like, I suppose you kind of have to be somewhat aligned with politics and what's going on in politics to prepare yourself for what's going on in the world or what possible outcomes there could be. Like, what do you think when you see Zuckerberg building a bunker or Bill Gates building a bunker?
Well, I look at them, and because there's been more than a few billionaires and like Hollywood types and tech CEOs and stuff who have done that, and they've built bunkers. Like I wonder if it's they see the possibility of like even an EMP or coronal mass ejection. They see the possibilities of collapses of governments, and then or even economic collapse. And I'm wondering if they just want to hedge their bets, but and then they have the money to do it too. So like I kind of like they have so much money. Like it's one of those, maybe it's not really an agenda thing as much as it's like why not have a bunker, you know, one billionaire's got a bunker. Next thing you know, all the billionaires get bunkers, right? It's like one billionaire goes to space, everyone wants to go to space, right? So, but I do when it comes to a guy like Zuckerberg, I do kind of that kind of makes me think a little bit because they have access to all the algorithms, and I think the power behind having access to all the social media algorithms and being able to really get a good idea of what's going on worldwide through them. I do sometimes wonder about that and whether or not guys like Zuckerberg know a lot more about what's going on than even governments do, just because of the amount of data that they have access to. They can kind of almost predict what's going to happen, and maybe he is kind of predicting something's going to happen, and he's hedging his bets with a very nice bunker.
Yeah, well, we've seen a few climate disasters, let's say in a few years with wildfires. I think Canada had a few, didn't they, last year?
Oh yeah.
And across Europe had a few. And then he's seeing something about it turns out a lot of these were man-made, and then you get these two kind of narratives that the climate change is being pushed. And I've been watching some of the US Congress where they said, look, our emissions are only 0.04%, or sorry, carbon is only 0.04% of the atmosphere. So how could we ever have such a dangerous effect on it at all? But yes, they disregard that and they keep pushing and keep pushing. Um, and then you see these kind of like it's non-stop raining in Ireland here since the start of the year. And I know Ireland's known for its rain, but I know local farmers who can't do anything in their fields, at all with their crop. It rained all day today. Um, and you know, my an example not too far away from yourselves, I suppose, was um, NASA in Alaska had this weather control project going on about 15 years ago, I think, roughly around then. And born from that, during the Olympic Games in China, they were able to move the clouds out away from the stadium. Um, Sometimes it worries me how much more control do they have than we think they have? If they really want to push a climate catastrophe and they're moving clouds around the skies and people are swallowing it up because they're seeing wildfires and they're seeing excess rain and they're seeing rising water levels, how, like, and these guys are then building bunkers, the same guys who are pushing these ideas, it makes you worried that, you know, maybe there's something way more sinister going on, and maybe the likes of these skills are way more in need than we think.
Yeah, I mean, regardless of whether or not the weather's being manipulated, I mean, I can definitely say without a doubt it's changing. Uh, like even where I live, the amount of the wildfire season is getting longer and more intense every year, basically. I think right now we have a record low snowpack. Like it just didn't snow. Um, my wife likes to go snowshoeing, and she hasn't had a chance to go at all this year. Like, and we live with mountains, basically half an hour away. Like, and they're usually covered in snow, and they're not. So I've seen it I've seen it happening over the past 43 years I've been alive. That the climate has absolutely been changing, and I mean whether or not it's like intentional is, I mean, we'll probably never really find out, but we definitely need to. The self-reliance thing helps with that because if you can grow your own food and you can just having a backyard garden, you're going to kind of get a bit more of a feel for how the climate's changing, and you're going to be able to adapt quite easily to that because you'll like physically be there, like in the dirt, planting your seeds, and one year, oh hey, the growing season's gotten a little bit shorter, maybe got longer, or maybe this month was better, and you can adjust things. You get a kind of a better feel for how things are changing, and that'll help you to like adapt to it. If you start noticing that your growing season's shrinking, then you can kind of you can plan for that. If you know your winter is getting longer, maybe you're going to start preparing for a longer winter, knowing that the power grid is going to get taxed. Maybe you start preparing for the power grid going down in the winter because that happens on a regular basis too. When you start cranking up the heat, and we're all in electric heat, uh, then you could, if you're more in tune to everything, you can kind of prepare for that a little bit better. And yeah, but yeah, I definitely think that we need to use climate change as a kind of a wake up call to get prepared and get as self-reliant as we possibly can.
Yeah. I think, have you seen, I guess in the last few years, I've seen this more prevalent that there's people divided a little bit. And I'd say, kind of off the top of my head, I'm thinking that maybe there was three divisions or three groups that they separated into. There was the people who were kind of going along with everything that was being put through the TV and the radio. There's people who were worried about everything. And there's people who didn't know where they stood and did just bury their head in the sand about it completely. Um, do you see a certain type of personality or certain traits in people who are more attracted to your projects and what you're doing here with the no grid survival projects?
Well, I think it's definitely the people who are questioning what they see, like, and also people who are worried about stuff too. Like, if if you're worried about natural disasters, you're going to be more gravitating towards a book like this. But if you're questioning the narratives that we get that are coming out, whether it be climate change or the grid or whatever, you're more likely to be gravitating more towards like a self-reliance thing. And it doesn't take much to find the book. Like if you start like even if it was something like your water system, you wanted how do I get off the city water, and you start Googling about how to do that, or water or backup water. Eventually you're probably going to find the book, or you're going to at least get down a path that's going to lead you there, right? Same thing with power. Like, how do I set up backup power? You're going to eventually probably find your way through the book as well. And it's those types of people who are like seeing the narratives are coming out and they're questioning it. Those are the ones that are really gravitating towards buying no grid survival projects. And then, of course, too, and then, like I said, people are scared of things happening. Like, if you're worried about an earthquake happening and you're looking to get prepared, it's definitely something that's without a doubt going to cross your path.
I seen a comment on, I don't know, I know it's actually, it was Jordan Peterson and Dr. Phil released a podcast yesterday. I know Peterson is a fellow Canadian. I don't know what your stance is on him, but I seen the two of them maybe put a video out yesterday about the attack on, it was an attack on families and faith, and there was something else. It was three. I can't think it off the top of my head. And they both went through what they see kind of in the um, social sphere, that the nuclear family is kind of being attacked, and the Christian faith a bit has been a bit seems to be a bit attacked, and I seen a comment. I think it was Rose at the top comment, and it said something like lift weights, eat steaks, find God, and it had thousands of likes straight off the bat. Um, I don't know what you think about that. The whole lift weight, eat steaks, find God.
Well, I think um like definitely the lift weights, eat steak. Yeah, like um I think that's actually an underrated part of being self-reliant is just getting healthy. Like just like there's so much benefit to lifting weights. Going for a run, training martial arts, and then eating. Like, the war against eating meat is kind of a weird thing I've noticed in the past little while, where they are trying to demonize it so much. But like, that's the only reason we're here is because our ancestors ate meat. Like, they went hunted down gazelles in the savannah, cooked it, and ate it, and their brains developed. That's the only reason why we're all here. So, like, the war against that is it's kind of baffling. And then like in terms of like finding God, I'm agnostic myself, so I don't really have an opinion. But having some kind of faith is I don't ever see that as a negative for anyone. Like it's like having something to believe in. I never saw that as negative. Uh, for like it's just if it makes you a better person, then I say go for it. And I see that there is an online push now for a lot of people going back to uh, the major religions, and it's I see it as a definite positive. And I mean, really, I think that's also like a little tiny silent rebellion against the political sphere that, there's been this push almost away from the churches and people start going back. I mean, it's all these little subtle bits of rebellion that we're doing against the system, so to speak. And I think it's good to see. And I know a lot of, like, as I say, I'm agnostic. I know a lot of people who are religious and are some people who weren't religious were now becoming religious. And I see there's nothing but a benefit.
Mm. It's interesting because the statement even of lifting weights and eating steak and the podcast being about the attack on the family structure and faith and it's interesting we talk about the meat element of it where obviously you know, I know there's a carnivore diet out there, and I'm not fully on the carnivore diet, but I have been leaning more towards steak and eggs even for breakfast, let's say, and taking out the kind of refined carbs out of the diet. I'm feeling much more lighter. I do intermittent fasting as well, and I find breaking my fast with a bit of steak and eggs, really fills me up and gives me a bit more energy to stay going in the day.
Yeah.
Um, I have three kids, and I never wanted, because I'm moving on to the nuclear family side of things now. I never wanted the climate or the times to dictate my family number. How many. I'd like a big family. I don't want inflation to affect that or any kind of anything to stand in that way. And I know it's maybe not the most practical way of thinking about it, but there's some things that are more deeply enshrined, I guess. At the end of the day, when you're a grandfather or, when you want a big family there, and I think it's a nice thing to have. Like my father comes from a family of 10. Most people have 1 to 2 kids these days. It happened very quickly. And it's not a nice trend, I don't think. Like they say where our population rate is no longer at the same, it was doubling in the 80s, and now it's not even at reproduction level. And
Yeah.
it's scary because I read a good bit about excess death and drop of fertility. And I'm wondering, is it to do with food? Is it to do with, there's a whole host of things controversial you could get into there. But I don't want the times to dictate the family size. In terms of finding God, like I go to my kids' local school and we grew up in Catholic Ireland and we said our prayers going to school and we did our communion and confirmation and all the sacraments. My son goes to an Educate Together, and there seems to be um like they can't say Christmas in there. It's the total opposite. There's no cross anywhere on the wall where there's other religions to be more inclusive, and you can't talk about then things. It's like it's taboo, and it's a very quick turnaround. And it is it's a scary how quick the world changes. Um, and I'm only 35. And I guess you've probably seen it more, because you have, it seems to be more rapidly changing. Do you think I'm just reacting to because I'm going through it, or do you think that's true that it's polarizing a lot quicker?
I think it is. I think just going off of conversations with my kids, I think the polarization and I think like headsets they use the word woke, but woke culture and stuff like that, um, and all of the political correctness and all of that, I think is hitting a peak because like my kids are more along the lines of like they just like they're kind of tired of it. They're more making fun of it now, like all the political correctness stuff. They're like, and they just kind of they're like they don't care what anyone does. They don't care. They just want everyone to kind of just leave them alone. They want to leave everyone else alone. And there's more of that around. Even talking to their friends and stuff. Like it seems to me that it got really divisive for quite a while, but now it's kind of like going back down the opposite direction where it's I think they've seen with like cancel culture and stuff like that, like that's what can happen with it and when it goes too far. And I think it has gone too far and now it's being pulled back. And I think, I mean, my kids are, like my oldest is in high school. So there's still got a little ways to go before they start making changes in public policy. But I think within the next like 10, 20 years, it's going to go 180 degrees and we're going to get back to it. And I think even with like having bigger families and stuff like that. I think it's going to go the same direction. Like the kids are the generation coming up now, even though they're stuck on uh, social media and screens and stuff. I think they're going to actually be a pretty positive, uh, pretty positive influence of society once they start getting to the point where they start making policy decisions and start getting into governments and start changing and steering the ship back the
Mm.
right way because ultimately it's their world. And I think they realize that and they are seeing where it could go. And even conversation I've had with like the kids who do my kickboxing class, like even them, they're into self-sufficiency and stuff. They want to learn stuff. They want to know how to do stuff. They want to know practical skills. Like they're interested in things like that. And I think that think we gotta wait a little bit and survive it a little bit longer. But I think we're gonna see some big changes, and I think they're gonna. I think this generation coming up is going to be the one that makes those changes.
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, that's a very, I think that's a positive note to even to finish on. Tell me just really quickly, if people were to go straight from this to download, not to download, but to find your book for purchase, what site would they go straight to?
The NoGridSurvivalProjects.com. There's a few sites out there, but I think that's the main one is NoGridSurvivalProjects.com. Yeah, you go there, you can buy the book straight from there. There's also a digital copy of the book as well that you can have right away. So you don't have to wait for the physical copy to get shipped to you. You'll have a PDF download. And there are some other like smaller ebooks that come with it as well. I can't remember off the top of my head what they were, but there's some. It gets you get quite a bit of value for the $37 it costs.
Yeah, very good. Look, I really appreciate you taking time out. It was great talking to you. It's a
Yeah,
really interesting subject. And I'm gonna get a copy myself after speaking to you as well. So, yeah, look, and I hope it goes. I hope it continues to lift because I think it's a great utility for people to have. I think it's a timeless piece. You know, you're always going to like rainwater is not going to change, you know,
yeah,
and filters aren't going to change. And this scenario, you know, this book would have been useful 30 years ago, and it's going to be useful in 30 years' time.
absolutely.
So I think it's great. And look, that's all. I appreciate you taking the time out.
Yeah, absolutely. It was fun. I like this.
Yeah, well, appreciate it. And look, sure, look, we might talk again in the future, and hopefully that book might worm its way a bit more into society by then.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Look, appreciate that, Michael. Thanks very much.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.